What do I gain from it? Explore a foundational work in the realm of modern feminism. In this groundbreaking piece of feminist literature, Simone de Beauvoir asserts, one is not born, but rather becomes, a woman. Although this idea might seem self-evident in contemporary society, it was a highly controversial and debated assertion when The Second Sex was published in 1949. While advancements for women have occurred globally in the past 6 decades, de Beauvoir's concepts remain incredibly pertinent. Across these summaries, she delves into the historical trajectory of women's roles in human societies, spanning from prehistory to her contemporary era. De Beauvoir elucidates how the notion of woman has evolved, relegating women to passive lives within the shadows of men. Before delving further, let's examine a couple of key concepts integral to de Beauvoir's arguments. The other. This concept posits that each thesis has its antithesis. In the context of gender dynamics, women are the other to men. Without women as the other to be ruled over, men would not exist. Immanence versus transcendence. De Beauvoir employs these terms to distinguish the realms assigned to women and men, respectively. Immanence characterizes women's sequestered domain, where they are perceived as passive, static, and self-absorbed. On the other hand, transcendence represents men's opposing sphere, active, creative, productive, powerful, and extending outward into the external universe. Now that we've explored these pivotal concepts, let's delve into the essence of de Beauvoir's work. While differences exist between males and females across various species, such distinctions do not inherently warrant a difference in societal status. Observing the animal kingdom, including humans, reveals undeniable variations between males and females. However, arguing for disparate societal roles based on these biological differences lacks a solid foundation. Biologically, human males often exhibit greater physical strength, boasting more muscle mass, red blood cells, and lung capacity. Nevertheless, the importance of such attributes depends on societal values. Cultures that reject violence undermine attempts to establish male dominance based on physical prowess. The belief in male superiority relies on the arbitrary notion that physical strength should determine dominance. Beyond biological arguments, psychoanalytical explanations have been proposed to rationalize gender inequality. Sigmund Freud, for instance, posited that the divergence between males and females begins at the genital phase during puberty. He asserted that males associate pleasure with the penis, while females shift from clitoral to vaginal pleasure, making the penis and penetration the object of desire. Freud further suggested that women experience penis envy, feeling inferior due to the perceived loss of a once existent penis. However, Freud's theory is inherently flawed, rooted in a male-centric model. The concept of penis envy hinges on male genitalia being considered the norm, reducing female genitalia to a perceived deficiency, an other. If neither biology nor psychology adequately justifies the discrepancy in societal status between females and males, what, then, is the underlying cause? Human societies underwent a transition from matriarchy to patriarchy, establishing a dominant narrative that marginalized women and emphasized their role as the other. Contrary to the common assumption that patriarchy has always prevailed, historical evidence suggests that many prehistoric societies were matriarchal. These societies, often centered around agriculture, viewed property and children as communal assets, with women holding a sacred status due to their role in bearing children. Children, in this context, would adopt the mother's clan name, a practice diverging from the contemporary custom of using the father's family name. The significance of women's fertility was further underscored by the worship of female deities like Ishtar in Babylon and Gaia, the Greek earth goddess. During the era of matriarchy, men lived in awe and fear of the mystical power associated with women, contributing to the conceptualization of woman as the other. However, with the rise of patriarchy, this sense of otherness intensified. The advent of slavery played a pivotal role in relegating women to the status of the other. As societies shifted away from the necessity of women's labor, they were marginalized from the workforce. Consequently, as men dominated both the realms of work and ideas, women ceased to be perceived as mystical creators and were reduced to passive recipients of men's creative seeds. This reductionist perspective found expression in the philosophy of Aristotle, who posited that the prime mover, initiating the creation of the world, embodied the male principle of movement. This principle acted upon the female principle of passive matter, portrayed as a recipient rather than a creator. While patriarchy couldn't entirely eliminate female goddesses, it transformed them into passive deities of immanence. For instance, Gaia, once a powerful goddess, became associated with passive immanence, while male gods like Zeus represented transcendent will. As men ascended to dominance and conquered the external world, women experienced a decline in power, transitioning into a state of immanence characterized by passivity, introspection, and stasis. Throughout history, patriarchy has strengthened its hold on power through the establishment of structures such as inheritance and marriage. A significant shift occurred with the evolution of private property and familial inheritance. In contrast to early societies that held property communally, patriarchal societies emphasized private property, glorifying its accumulation within specific families. As men were now considered the active force in creating life and carrying the family line, women were systematically excluded from inheritance. Consequently, women, denied access to property ownership, became akin to possessions rather than individuals with agency. This transition from communal to private, male-owned property not only created a rift between men and women but also alienated women from broader societal participation. The institution of marriage played a crucial role in maintaining male control over family inheritance. Marriage served not only to dictate the direction of inheritance but also further dehumanized women, reducing them to mere assets. Young women were closely controlled by a father or the eldest male relative, and upon marriage, this control was transferred to the husband. In some societies, marriage even deprived women of property rights if their husbands died. For instance, ancient Greece had the institution of epiclerate, where widowed women were compelled to marry the eldest male relative in their husband's family to ensure the property remained within the patriarchal lineage. Another radical practice recorded in a Roman text, common in ancient Brittany, involved several men from one family sharing wives as communal property. If one man died, the woman would be unable to inherit the wealth of any individual. While these examples are from ancient times, it prompts the question of whether contemporary times have brought about substantial changes in these structures. Let's delve further to explore the current landscape. In more recent history, there have been some improvements in the role of women, yet they continue to be subjugated to men. From the 15th century onward, women gradually gained prominence in cultural life, albeit within the confines of the institution of marriage. Women in 17th century France, for instance, engaged in discussions on philosophy, literature, and art in literary salons. Despite being denied formal education, figures like Marie de Gournay and Madame de Lafayette became renowned, surpassing the fame of their husbands. Women also made inroads into politics during this period. The Duchess d'Aiguillon wielded significant influence over Cardinal Richelieu, the de facto ruler of France. Women like Elizabeth I and Christina, Queen of Sweden, reached the highest offices of their nations by remaining unmarried and thereby avoiding subjugation to a husband's will. However, despite these advancements, the majority of women continued to occupy a subjugated position. As we entered the early 19th century, women's status remained inferior to that of men. In the United States in 1918, women earned less than half of what men earned, and female miners in Germany during the same period earned a quarter less than men, despite producing the same amount of coal. Moreover, women who chose to focus on raising children and managing households were also deemed inferior and incapable compared to their male counterparts. Since household labor went unpaid, housewives remained financially dependent on their husbands. This created a double bind, indicating that despite some progress, women still did not enjoy equal footing with men. Religion has played a pivotal role in shaping the perception of women as the other throughout history. From the beginning, many religions have positioned women beneath men. Consider the origin story of Adam and Eve in Judaism and Christianity. Adam, created to enjoy the Garden of Eden, becomes lonely, prompting God to create Eve as his companion. However, when Eve persuades Adam to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge, she is blamed for the fall of man and their expulsion from Eden. This narrative marks a crucial point where woman is cast as the other. While man is portrayed as a free, creative spirit, woman is reduced to flesh and sin. In Christianity, this sinful nature of female flesh is believed to pass on original sin, rendering every newborn guilty before birth. This perspective on female flesh as sinful is not exclusive to Christianity. In the Roman Empire, soldiers were forbidden from having sex with their wives before going into battle. Romans held the belief that a soldier's strength would be drained and consumed by female flesh. However, this perception of female flesh is not applied universally. Prepubescent girls and older women past their childbearing years, those deemed non-sexual, are not viewed in the same light. Myths about women extend beyond religious narratives and play a significant role in reinforcing the perception of women as the other. These myths often contribute to subtle forms of female otherness, perpetuating stereotypes and limiting the understanding of women. An example is the mythology surrounding menstruation. Even in the 1940s, some people in the south of France believed that pork being cured for ham or bacon would go bad if salted by a menstruating woman. Such beliefs, although seemingly absurd, continue to influence contemporary attitudes, as seen in phrases like, "It's her time of the month," implying that menstruation has a mystical influence over women's behavior. Even seemingly benevolent myths, such as the female muses in Greek mythology, contribute to the perception of women as passive beings meant to inspire rather than create. The muses embody the idea that women exist to inspire the transcendent will of men, reinforcing the notion of woman as a creature of immanence. These oversimplified archetypes, whether in the form of holy Madonna figures or negative portrayals like the praying mantis, contribute to the otherness of women by presenting them as mysterious and incomprehensible. Such myths can lead to a dismissal of women's real-life complexities, with men attributing female anger or indignation to inherent incomprehensibility rather than addressing their own behavior.
Remarkably, 88% of our audience hasn't participated yet, prompting a gentle request for your support. If you discover even a hint of value in our content, we would genuinely appreciate your support through likes, shares, and subscriptions. Your comments serve as the bedrock of our progress, illuminating our strengths and areas for improvement. Thank you. Now, let's immerse ourselves back into the review.
The process of becoming a woman starts in childhood and is heavily influenced by societal expectations, gender norms, and cultural practices. As soon as children are born, their minds are essentially the same, but societal norms quickly shape distinct ways of being in the world for boys and girls. In the early stages, infants are treated similarly, but the divergence becomes noticeable after weaning. Boys are encouraged to be a man, fostering traits of independence and strength, while girls continue to receive pampering and affection, often being treated as infants for a more extended period. This divergence becomes even more pronounced as children become aware of their sexual organs. Boys are often allowed and even encouraged to explore their bodies, fostering a sense of agency, while girls are taught to be discreet and feel a sense of shame about their bodies. This early conditioning pushes females into a more passive role. This divide is further emphasized in childhood activities. While boys may engage with their genitals, girls, lacking a similar focus, are often given dolls. The symbolism of giving a girl a doll, especially in languages like French where poupée can mean both band-aid and doll, suggests that the doll serves as a dressing for a psychic wound. This early introduction of dolls reinforces the societal expectation that a girl's role is to emulate her mother, preparing for the future caretaking of children. This childhood conditioning sets the stage for the complex process of becoming a woman in society, shaped by a combination of historical, cultural, and gender-specific factors. As girls enter adolescence, the process of becoming a woman intensifies, marked by a growing awareness of societal expectations and physical changes. Initially, girls may associate having children with positive maternal care. However, as they become less dependent on their mothers and the distinction between the roles of boys and girls becomes more evident, girls start to perceive confinement to traditional female roles as undesirable. Instead, they aspire to the father's role, which symbolizes possibilities and agency. This desire for a different role is exemplified by a statistic showing that a significant majority of girls, over 75%, express a wish to be boys. This desire intensifies as the physical transformations associated with womanhood become more apparent. The development of breasts leads to the objectification of girls, reducing them to mere flesh. Physical markers that distinguish them from boys deepen their sense of otherness. The onset of menstruation further amplifies this shift. The first period, often a painful experience, occurs in an atmosphere of shame and taboo surrounding female genitalia. This biological event makes girls acutely aware of their connection to their mothers, realizing that they are now potential childbearers and must bear the weight of the risks and consequences associated with sexuality. This phase in adolescence exacerbates the process of becoming the other, as girls grapple with societal expectations and physical changes. Sexuality and the initiation into sexual experiences represent the final stages in the process of becoming a woman. However, for women, the loss of virginity is not just an initiation into adulthood. It is a pivotal point in the challenging journey toward mature sexuality. As girls mature into women, they grapple with the realization that they will engage in sexual relations with men, a notion that often elicits feelings of disgust. This repulsion stems from the understanding that the very attributes consumed by the male gaze, breasts, hips, flesh, are symbols that define them as women subordinate to male power. In response to this discomfort, some girls engage in self-harming behaviors, providing a means to both punish themselves and assert control over their own bodies. This self-inflicted harm allows them to embody the dual roles of the active man and the passive woman, offering a semblance of agency in the face of societal expectations. Traditional notions of sexuality reinforce these roles, portraying male sexuality in active, militaristic terms, where men conquer women and assert dominance. This narrative is reflected in language. Men discharge their semen, pull women into bed, and so on. The idea of the passive woman, figuratively penetrated by the male gaze and then literally penetrated during sexual intercourse, is deeply ingrained in cultural perceptions of sexuality. Contrary to common belief, many women do not find pleasure in the act of penetration, and for some, it can even be painful. While women often focus on clitoral pleasures, the emphasis on the vaginal aspect of sexuality arises primarily when framed within the context of man conquering woman. This dynamic reinforces the perception of women's flesh as immanence, finding pleasure only through the transcendence of man's sexual activity. Motherhood serves as the final transition in a woman's journey toward womanhood. In a patriarchal society, pregnancy becomes a symbol of man's transcendent power, emphasizing the act of planting a child in the immanent, female flesh. However, the process of pregnancy also deepens a woman's immanence by subordinating her own needs to those of her child. Even before the child is born, the fetus's needs take precedence, and any initial feelings of transcendence and creation are often replaced by physical discomforts such as cravings, nausea, and sore breasts. Some psychologists, like Wilhelm Steckel, have even suggested that morning sickness might be a manifestation of a woman's unconscious desire to expel the fetus, akin to ejecting a poorly digested meal. While pregnancy may foster a sense of togetherness between a woman and her child, the postnatal period can bring about a heightened sense of isolation. The new mother quickly realizes that the child no longer belongs to her as it once did. Instead, she now belongs to the child. Her life becomes dedicated to meeting the needs of the infant, investing time in nurturing and feeding. Interestingly, motherhood can liberate women from the burdens of being viewed primarily as erotic objects for men. The symbolic value of the breast undergoes a transformation, shifting from an erotic symbol to a representation of care, nourishment, and comfort. This change means that the breast is no longer an object of male desire, providing women the freedom to breastfeed in public without feeling shame about their bodies. The tradition of marriage, which has historically played a significant role in the subjugation of women, continues to shape the lives of women in contemporary times. Despite societal changes, the institution of marriage often reinforces women's passive roles, with men still perceived as the heads of households, and wives expected to adopt their husbands' names and religions. While legal obligations for wives to obey their husbands have diminished in many places, there are still regions where women face absolute authority from their spouses. Even in more liberal societies where the influence of marriage has waned, women can find themselves confined within a cage of passivity within the household. The burden of household work, historically placed on women, continues, with women often shouldering the majority of unpaid labor. This unequal distribution of domestic responsibilities can contribute to the gender wage gap, as women may have less time available for paid work. The economic security offered by a partner may incentivize women to remain in such situations. Stuck in this metaphorical cage, women often live lives of imminence. The demands of taking care of the household leave them with little time to pursue personal endeavors, isolating them from broader societal engagement and professional opportunities. While caring for a family can bring a sense of fulfillment, the realization that their loved ones can exist independently may lead women to experience feelings of abandonment and loneliness. The complex dynamics of marriage, deeply rooted in historical norms, continue to shape the lives of women in multifaceted ways. The subjugation of women extends to various aspects of their lives, including the way they are pressured to dress to please the male gaze. Women often find themselves conforming to societal expectations, wearing uncomfortable clothing such as short skirts, high heels, skimpy lingerie, and restrictive corsets. Despite the discomfort, many women associate dressing in this manner with feeling good, as it aligns with the societal gaze that forces them to be perceived as desirable. As women age, the pressure to maintain their fading desirability intensifies. While ideals of manliness, virility, and agency often endure or increase for men as they grow older, female ideals emphasizing youth and fertility diminish. In an attempt to resist this decline, many women strive to reclaim their youth, dressing in ways that accentuate the desirable roles they once played. This struggle against the effects of time persists until death, unless a woman chooses to embrace the natural process of aging. Allowing oneself to grow old can be a liberating experience for women, as older women are typically not regarded as sexual objects, and they may be free from traditional obligations tied to caring for husbands or children. Embracing old age presents an opportunity for women to break free from the constraints imposed by societal expectations of femininity. Unfortunately, this liberation often comes late in life, limiting the time women have to enjoy the newfound freedom from the burdens associated with being perceived solely as woman. While marriage and motherhood are factors that shape the identity of women, it's essential to recognize that unmarried women may still face challenges and societal expectations. The notion of sexual freedom for women involved in prostitution is often misunderstood. Although some may perceive prostitutes as embodying sexual freedom, the reality is that prostitution can be another form of female servitude, rooted in the exploitation of women's sexuality. Prostitution can contribute to the division of women, making them more vulnerable and easier to exploit. Those engaged in sex work may face social stigma and derogatory labels, reinforcing the societal preference for monogamous marriages. Contrary to the misconception that sex workers willingly choose their profession, many enter into prostitution due to desperation and oppression, often driven by poverty. Historically, poverty has been a significant factor leading women into prostitution. As observed by French doctor Parent Duchâtelet in 1836, the lack of work and the consequent misery resulting from inadequate salaries were among the primary causes of prostitution. Even today, poverty remains a driving force behind many individuals entering the sex industry. In the past, women who became prostitutes often had backgrounds as servants for the aristocracy and middle class. As societal preferences shifted, leaving fewer opportunities for domestic work, a considerable number of women found themselves unemployed and turned to prostitution as a means of survival. The lack of a widespread women's rights movement and the persistence of female subjugation can be attributed to various factors, making it challenging for women to initiate large-scale revolts. One significant obstacle is the ingrained belief that women are not responsible for their own destinies and that external forces, particularly men, should guide their lives. This message is instilled from a young age, creating a sense of powerlessness and eliminating any feeling of responsibility for their situation. In many societies, women are taught that their happiness is contingent upon men, reinforcing the notion of male activity and female passivity. This perspective becomes women's everyday truth, even in countries where women have limited voting rights or face restrictions on business ownership. Economic dependency is another critical factor hindering women from liberating themselves. Many women are financially reliant on their husbands, making it difficult to revolt without risking the loss of their livelihoods. Collective action, focusing on the economic situation of all women, is identified as the key to breaking these bonds and achieving emancipation. While some women may attempt to navigate traditional male roles in business and politics, this approach may not fully address the structural issues within a world still predominantly governed by men. The justification of subjugation through love is a common theme in romantic comedies, where women may rationalize their relationships by saying, "But I love him." This phenomenon is explained by the powerful force of love, which allows women to justify their subordinate positions. When a girl realizes the societal differences between genders and recognizes that she cannot attain the esteemed position of boys, she may desire the next best thing, to be loved by them. The prescribed roles of womanhood, such as being a wife or mother, often seem attainable only through finding a man. Faced with limited alternatives, women employ the emotion of love to convince themselves that enduring the constraints of their roles is worth the suffering. However, this self-objectification to become the object of a man's desire can lead to narcissism. Some women internalize the male gaze to such an extent that they view themselves solely as objects of desire. In essence, they fall in love with themselves, reveling in their own physical attributes and beauty. Marie Bashkirtsev, a Ukrainian sculptor, serves as an example of how this narcissistic mentality can influence women's choices. Bashkirtsev, deeply in love with herself, sought to immortalize her beauty in statues crafted from the finest marble. Her story also illustrates how this narcissistic mindset might lead women to remain entwined with men, as marrying a wealthy man became necessary for her to afford the marble and free time required for her artistic pursuits. Achieving true gender equality requires a shift in perspective, where both men and women recognize each other as peers and acknowledge the subjectivity of both genders. This entails avoiding the objectification of one another, eliminating practices like portraying the male body as mere flesh for female pleasure in advertisements, as such reversals of power can perpetuate antagonism between the sexes. For women to achieve equality, it's crucial to move beyond the traditional roles of passivity and immanence. While some may be hesitant to relinquish the security associated with passivity, true equality requires embracing an active and courageous stance. Women need to challenge themselves to exhibit the same courage and work ethic expected of men. It's essential to understand that womanhood is a social construct, not an innate identity. To attain equality, women must transcend the societal construct that confines them to passivity and immanence. This involves demanding the same level of courage and dedication from themselves as expected from men. However, individual transformation is not enough. Societal changes are imperative for female liberation. Legal frameworks should protect women's rights, ensuring access to birth control and, if necessary, abortions. Women should have autonomy over their bodies, and society should provide free childcare and paid parental leave to support those who choose to have children. In essence, achieving gender equality requires a collective effort, where both men and women affirm their brother and sisterhood. This shift in societal attitudes, coupled with legal and institutional changes, is fundamental to realizing true gender equality. The central message of the book is that womanhood is not an inherent or biological category but rather a social construct shaped by historical, religious, and mythological influences. The process of becoming a woman involves societal expectations, cultural norms, and power dynamics perpetuated by male-dominated forces. To achieve true freedom and equality, there is a need for a collective understanding that challenges and transcends the constructed notions of womanhood. Recognizing woman as a social construct is crucial for fostering genuine gender equality. A heartfelt thank you for accompanying us until the end, demonstrating your commitment to personal growth and wisdom. In the spirit of reciprocity, I kindly request a small favor. A simple act of liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting would be sincerely appreciated. Your support not only extends the channel's reach to a broader audience but also plays a pivotal role in fostering its continuous growth. As an expression of gratitude, I assure you a consistent delivery of insightful book reviews drawn from some of the most impactful books in the world.